Hello and welcome to the Stampscapes Stamp Along. This is a scene that took me about 2 hours to do last night in a live stream, and I'm going to look to do this same or really similar version in about, I don't know, maybe 25% of the time, and I think we can handle that. All right, so if you're going to do this, all of the items that were used in this scene, or will be used in this scene, are listed in the description section under the video. Just click on the show more, and that area will expand and everything is listed out there, okay? All right, so we're stamping out the dirt road here, okay? This is the larger version. And I'm going to be using StazOn ink just so I can get into it right away without having to wait for my inks to dry. You can use a dye-based ink if you want to. Dye-based inks will dry really fast too because we are working on a semi-gloss paper. You can use a matte paper though, and that would be just fine. All right, looking for my sedge filler stamp here, and right along the top of this road what we'll do is we'll make some impressions. Okay, you can go for a couple multiple impressions. I wouldn't go for like 4 impressions with the same inking, but you know, you can go for a couple like that. If you don't match it up perfectly, don't worry about it. The trees are going to be covering up that anyway. You want to overlap your sedge filler a pretty decent amount. Okay, and that is that. All right, so going along just, I don't know, pretty quickly here, we're going to stamp our larger winter ash. Okay, now if you don't get these exactly where I stamp them, don't worry about it. Okay, so this one right here, I'm going to stamp this one a little bit higher. On the scene last night, I did stamp this quote stamp up top. I may or may not do that in this one, but you can certainly leave space for it, or just a word stamp, whatever you want to stamp out, okay? So we'll go like that, and we'll go with another one. See, I stamped it out, right about, I don't know, probably an inch from the bottom there. So it's going off the page, of course. And this one, I will stamp, I stamped this one a little bit higher, almost all the way to the top of the page. Okay. So go like that. And let's see. We have our winter ash small here. Basically, the only place I don't want to stamp these out are right on, you know, the middle of the road or something like that. You know, of course, that wouldn't be good placement. Okay. I actually double stamped that one a little bit. No problem. It's going to be covered up with a lot of little tiny dots and everything. All right. So there we go. I can almost stamp another one over there if I'm not going to be stamping a quote, but let's just stick with the same, you know, composition as yesterday, so we can do a little compare contrast type of thing with, just how long this takes to do. Okay, now, if you want to, you can add in some of these fence elements here, okay? And I think I am going to do that. I liked how they kind of anchored the base of the scene down a little bit. But I also think it looks really good as is like that, okay? All right, so I'm just going to be using a small portion of this, but I'm going to ink up a pretty good amount of it. If you don't know exactly, you know, where you're going to be stamping it out, it's best to just kind of go a little bit more than what you think you'll need, just in case, okay? In other words, you don't under ink it and then stamp it out and then, half the, there's a big gap where the fence is supposed to go or something like that, like down below, okay? Okay, let's see. One of the things I have to remember to do is always put the lid back on the Stays-On ink pad while I'm using it. If I'm using dye-based inks, I just leave them open while I'm using it, but the Stays-On dries so fast. Okay, now this one over here, just don't go over your road, have it out to the side. And there we go. So it's a nice visual lead-in into the scene like that, okay? Now I added some reeds yesterday on mine. I think I'm going to leave those ones out. I think the fence itself really provided a nice, kind of foreground element, and it looks just fine as is. Okay, now let's see. I'm looking for my little fisherman. Well, where did he go? Let me pause the video while I find my little guy. Oh, I found him. All right. I have a lot of stamps everywhere here. And we'll take our little fisherman and stamp him on out. As I mentioned in the video last night, plenty of pressure right here, not too much pressure on the fishing pole, okay? Because I don't want to like smash that fishing pole, giving it a big blotchy look, because it's just this narrow little element within the design, okay? So you don't want that to smash out, and make it, look really wide or blurry. All right, so that is the foundation of everything. Now I have these tiny rock stamps right here. That road is going to be brown tones, okay? I'll just take a brown rich cocoa. Let's go for a darker brown right here. I went with multiple tones in the video last night, the live stream. But I'm just going to go with one color here, and then we'll bring in a lot of different tones with colored pencils mainly in this video. All right. I just wanted to kind of compare and contrast to what just straight colored pencils might look like in a scene. I don't do that too often. I usually use them in conjunction with dye-based inks, but let's do a little comparison contrast here. All right, Cloud Cumulus. I'll go with a Bahama Blue right here. You can go with something a little bit lighter. The Bahama Blue is almost, it's almost too dark, but it's not really too bad. It's like a mid-tone blue. All right, now I'm going to wipe off around the perimeter, about a ½ an inch or so. Blot it off pretty good though, okay? So that when you stamp this out, I'm stamping it kind of right on that sedge filler line in the background, that sedge filler horizon line that I made. Okay, so this right here, you wipe it off pretty good with a dry paper towel, not a wet one. Like this. I change the angle slightly. And overlap your first impression, okay? Pretty good. Overlap it by a 1/4 inch or so. 1/4 inch to a ½ inch, okay? Remember, just wipe off the perimeter like that. It makes for really easy blending, okay? Because it kind of fades out around the edge where it's going to be blending in with the additional impression. In other words, when we're stamping it out, it doesn't have a real hard edge line like that because it's drier on the outside like that, okay? And there we go with our foundation right there. We did that in pretty quick order. All right. Now, what we're going to be doing is we have 3 different zones here that we want to kind of, have separate in terms of our hue design, our color design. Blues, greens, basically, and brown there. Okay, but we want these to harmonize a decent amount Okay, so what we have are some brown tones like this. All right, I have light, medium, and dark. No, it's not real light. I mean, I guess that could be the lighter version like that. But you basically just, and if you have a pack of colored pencils, you're going to have a range of tones like that, okay? It doesn't have to be these exact colors. Chances are if I do this one again, I'm just grabbing some pencils. There's more colors in my colored pencil, kit here, my box or set, I should say. And I'm not grabbing the same ones every time. I just want a general value scheme, going from lighter to darker, okay? All right, so what I do with my colored pencils is my strategy is to start light and work darker with the colored pencils. Now with the pens that we'll be using later, I kind of go opposite. All right, so with this, we just do a general light application with our lightest of colors, okay, within each area. But this is the good thing about this, okay? With a lot of different types of coloring where you're coloring designs that are made out of outlines, what you're doing is you're really trying to stay within the lines, right? Because you don't want it to go outside of outside of the borders of a given area or design. With this type of thing, because we're blending things together, you go over that a little bit. So that's one of those things that people have a hard time doing. It's easier for them. They're so used to coloring within the lines. It's like, okay, you're breaking a habit there. But is this harder to do or is it easier to do? It's much easier to do, right? Because you don't have to be so careful. So in other words, I'm taking some of this green and going into the road a little bit where it's going to be primarily brown, okay? And that's how you get this kind of blending, merging of tones. Now see, I'm not going in there completely. I went in there a little bit, but it's with a very light application of the lightest color of green that I'm using, okay? I go a little bit darker around the perimeter because I like to kind of frame off my scene with a little bit of a darker vignette when I'm working, okay? Let's go to the next tone, okay? So we went with this one. Now we're going with one that's not too much darker. All right, now what I might start doing is I might start focusing a little bit more on some variation, okay? So there's no set area that you have to retain, keep lighter than others, okay? So I'm generally making things a little bit darker under my trees because trees cast shadows, right? So it's a darker area. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, that's not a dark green. We're getting to it, though. We're just building things up gradually, okay? So here's this tree. It's casting a shadow like that. See, doesn't it already look like we have kind of lighting in a scene? Now, we're happen to be working with a very light color right now. So just remember, it's not supposed to all have come together because we haven't worked through, a value scale yet, okay? Try to taper it, though, a little bit darker to lighter like that, okay? That's all I'm doing. Leave some areas a little bit lighter than others, okay? Let's go to the next tone. And generally, I just start going in those areas that are a little bit darker, kind of blending out a little bit. See that little area in there is a little bit darker underneath my tree. If we deem, oh, I should have went a little bit more with that previous color, you can always go back and add more of it. Like I'm thinking, after I get through some of my shadow work here, I might go back in with some of my lighter tone green. I'll use some brown in the greens as well because that helps to give the green grasses much more of an earthy tone or feel to them, all right? So you just kind of pick, just some kind of general, oscillating light and dark area with your first color and just kind of generally stick with it. I mean, you can alter it if you think, oh man, I left that area light and maybe that area should have been darker. Well, you can't really erase colors or something like that, but you can make lighter tones, areas darker though. Okay, so feel free to do that. And I might be adjusting as well as I go along here. Here's another green. This one's roughly the same value as the previous one. Maybe it's a little bit brighter in terms of intensity. Not too much different though. But the hue, the type of green is a little bit different. This one's more like a Christmas green. So in other words, you get your nice variations just from using a variety of media, okay? So in other words, if you're doing some grasses, don't just look for a pencil that says like grass green or something like that, and then you're just doing it all uniform, okay? And it just makes, like I said, it makes things look richer as a result. Okay, now here's some brown tones. Let's start addressing some of those areas within our road, okay? We'll color the little boy too, little Fisher guy, later on. All right, so this is, this particular pencil is called Sand, okay? But I'll add that into my grassy area as well. Like I said, bringing some brown tones into my grasses often, it gives things a more mellow look, I tend to think. Sometimes more, more realistic, I guess. So there's that. Let's go to our next one. Hit the pause anytime, if I'm moving too fast. I know I'm kind of like just whizzing through this, but there's not very much to this right here. It's just kind of coloring in what the thing that's different. If people haven't done this type of thing before, it's the variation that, if there's a road like that, they're used to coloring in the whole road uniformly, with one value or, like one version of green, be it dye-based inks, alcohol inks, whatever. Okay, but here we're kind of defining light and shade by the retention of some of those lighter areas within the composition, okay? So in other words, you're doing less coloring to achieve kind of a wider ranging result, okay? Because you're depicting lighting as well as what color something is. Okay, that was some brown tones there. What I'm looking at right now is we need a little bit more shadow development, okay? Now, when you start looking at forms, you can see that there's darker areas within the designs themselves, okay? So here's the sedge filler. So when I get to tones about this dark, okay, pretty dark, I start developing those shadows a little bit more in the imagery. If you can see that texture anymore, the texture kind of gets a little bit obscured, the more coloring you put over the top of it, okay? But I'm looking for it here and there. On the road, you can see, those darker areas within that space, though, okay? So we'll fill that out a little bit. Like so. You don't have to go with a real hard kind of application of your colored pencils. You just kind of do it lightly at first, and then, the darker you want it to go, with a stronger application of whatever hue pencil you happen to be working with at the time, then you just keep adding more, okay? All right, now let's do a little comparison here with the previous version. That one's looking a lot brighter, okay, with some greens. So I'm going to go back in and add in maybe a couple more of these greens, the brighter tones, okay? I'm thinking maybe these two right here, okay? So I added very little of this one at first, just because I wanted to see how things were going. But see, now that I can see kind of this coming together, I can see how dark the shadows are going. I'll just come in here now with this one and just kind of brighten it up a little bit, okay? You go with the stronger application, you get a stronger saturation of that color there, okay? All right, I think that should do it. Oh, here, let's go with this green. Darker green a little bit more. All right. A little bit yellowy, but we'll use a lot of white paint pigment ink on this to finish it off really nicely. But also the paint pens really animate the piece. All right, so colored pencils for the sky. We'll have mostly clouds here. We'll keep them nice and light and billowy by not coloring them out too much. We'll bring in some color into them though. But here's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of filling in that open space, the negative space in the sky with this. That brings more lighting into the cloud areas because you're creating contrast up here a little bit. This one's not a dark blue, but you can already see when you bring in a little bit of an extra tone around those clouds like that, it makes those clouds seem lighter by contrast. We can make them look really light by making the sky really dark if we wanted to. All right, so I'll add some of this in some other areas as well. That was one blue. It's like a sky blue. Here's kind of more of a turquoise-ish blue. A little bit of a warmer blue, which will make it, I don't know, a good kind of temperature variation up in these clouds. You don't have to. You can just go with one color if you want to. But again, the more you layer things, the potentially richer the end result, okay? Now remember, this one, I don't think I'm going to use a quote stamp over this. You know, that's why I stamped out that cloud up high like that. But yeah, you can leave it as, you can even just, you know, not do the clouds too if you want to. All right, so that is our color scheme like that. Now I'm going to go with black, okay? And I'm going to really anchor a couple of these trees down that you see going into the grass like that. This is a semi-gloss cardstock as opposed to a matte, so not the most ideal type of surface for the layering of colored pencils, you know, because colored pencils work really good with, you know, papers that have a little bit of tooth to them. But it's not bad. You get the benefit of having really smooth impressions of your stamps. But you can use colored pencils and, to some degree, you know, maybe some pastels or chalks. Okay. But again, pastels and chalks and colored pencils work best on papers that have, you know, a decent degree of texture to them, some tooth, they call it. But there's our little road there with our black pen. All right, let's have some fun here. Let's go into our trees. You're going to grab your green pens like this, okay? Have a couple different versions. You'll have your white, and then a couple pinks here, okay? Maybe you can go with whatever colors you want, you know. I was thinking last night that these trees look pretty good, just white on there. And we're going to go a little bit less conservative, okay, with this. I added these dots onto my trees. I foliated them, okay, we'll call it, with, you know, a decent amount of paint. But I thought this looked it looked a little bit better the more I, you know, added on there, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'll work one tree at a time, but I might come back to this one too. But see, I'm kind of roughly adding it around my branches, having in front of some of the branches. Kind of group your little dots periodically. You know, in other words, don't just place them, you know, a quarter inch apart or something like that. Kind of group them like this. Cluster, I guess, is the word. This is a point, a 3mm paint pen, okay. I guess you can do it with a 0.7 extra fine, but that's really going to take you a long time if you do. But give it, if you don't have anything else, give it a try. Okay, so that's my one tree right there with this one green. We'll be moving through other colors. Okay, going over my tree here where I did a little bit of a double stamping. It's a little bit shaky looking, but we'll just say, oh, it is in the wind. So it's a little blowing around maybe a little bit. All right, and we'll come over to this one here. Looks like we're going to be coming up on 30 minutes here pretty soon. I wanted to see if I can get this in 30. It might take a little bit longer, but that's not too bad for a half-page scene, though, with a lot of coloring on there, or a color applications, but this still is going pretty fast here. You know, considering the amount of technique and areas to color. See, I'm flipping my card upside down so I can access these trees a little bit easier without, you know, putting my hand over the tops of, I don't know, some objects. Although, I don't know, I guess there's nothing to really smear in this scene. I guess I could just put my hand here and go like that. I don't know, just make sure you're not putting it in, you know, the paint that you've just applied while that's still wet. All right, that is it with our dark green. Let's move on to our lighter green now. This is where the scene for me really starts coming together, is in these lighter tones like this. Little cluster. Now, the most amount of leaf kind of texturing that I do, I think, is with that darkest color. As I start moving lighter and lighter, I probably apply less and less, okay? Just because I want these lighter ones to look like they're standing out closer to us, usually. You know, because that would be the leaves that would be kind of more illuminated. You know, the ones that are kind of within the body of the tree, you know, the peripheral leaves are usually a little bit lighter than within the interior of it. You know, so outside edge, the canopy, you know, up top. This is a light green. I guess you can see that, but if I didn't say that. Okay, this green is kind of roughly the same color as our grass area, so when I start stamping it over here, it really kind of blends in with the grass. If you stamp it on some of the grass, maybe it can be used as highlighting in a darker area within your grass. So remember to cluster. All right, now I am going to add in a few of these little highlights into my grassy area, I think. It starts to vary the texturing of the grass a little bit. I think that should do it. I'm moving so fast here. Some of this paint's probably, you know, a little bit wet still, but that is okay. All right, here comes white. White really is going to stand out quite a bit stronger from the background. At least in the darker areas. Up here in the, you know, where the clouds are behind it, it's not really standing out too much. So this white area could be, you know, highlights, but it's probably also like blossoms or something like that. Apple blossoms, I don't know. Whatever tree would be blossoming in, you know, with white blossoms. But these little, I don't know, these little, well, the leaves, of course, but these little blossoms really kind of make a statement for, you know, that says spring. Let's shake this up a little bit. It'll give me a little bit more of an opaque application of paint. Not quite opaque, it's pretty translucent. And it does dry lighter, or darker, I should say, than what it looks like when it's been freshly applied. For some reason, I don't know why. Yeah, okay, there we go. It's a little bit lighter. You had to get through some of that paint that was already in the tip there. You gotta shake these things up every time you use them. Even if you used them the night before, go ahead and give them a good shake again. All right, so this is what I was talking about, going a little bit more extreme with my application of paint there. Like so. Over here, they've already kind of gotten a little bit darker when dry. Okay, and let's add some of these down on the grassy surface as if, you know, those little blossoms, petals have fallen to the ground. Might have even some of these in the air like this. Like in the wind comes by and it kind of blows, you know, some of these to the ground. We'll put some of these on the road as well. Kind of makes for a shimmery surface. And let's go on with our bright pink here now for our tree blossoms. I mean, you can add as much as you want. If you like pink, go crazy with it. I'm going to do a slightly sparser application than my other colors, you know, the greens, the white. Shake that up a little bit. There we go. And it kind of just livens the whole thing up with those pink tones like that. Pink little blossoms there. All right. Let's see here. Let me grab, okay, so I have these colored pencils here, and I just mostly colored my little guy with those colored pencils, okay? I'm gonna put him in this little red shirt. And we'll give him a little bit of a blue overalls like this. I am going to go with a couple different values of these colors, just so they can look he can look a little bit more kind of three-dimensional as well. We don't want him to look flat because he is kind of a focal point of the scene, where someone's eye will go right to him. And let's give him a little bit of a straw hat. A little bit yellowish. A little bit of the sand color. And how about a little brown? I just put my hand right there. It's drying pretty fast, but it is still a little bit sticky from all of that paint pen that's sitting there now. And let's see, a little bit darker blue here. Maybe his legs a little bit darker. And what we'll do is we'll have him casting a shadow on the roadway there, like that. It kind of anchors him down, just like the trees are being anchored down by with their shadow being cast. Okay. Go with a couple versions of brown, and I'll probably come into it with black as well. Okay. Do it like that. Now, you can stop right there, and that would be a really nice statement. But if you want to kind of play around with some pigment ink can add a nice touch into your scene. It'll give it a little bit of a mistier look. It can make your clouds look a little bit more billowy. You're going to take a 100% cotton ball, and watch out because some of your pads are really super juicy. Mine's kind of a medium moist. I haven't re-inked this. I don't know if I've ever re-inked it, okay? But you're going to start it in your lighter area, okay? So like in these clouds up here, I'm just kind of reiterating the lightness of it with some additional pigment ink, okay? Now, again, you don't want to put blobs of paint down, which is kind of what pigment ink is almost like a paint, okay? I'm kind of adding a thin layer of it, okay? So let's see if I have where's my scratch black paper right here, okay? So you can see this is not super juicy, but I'm also kind of dabbing lightly, okay? So it's not like blob, 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 okay? If you do have a very juicy pad, then just blot it off, a few times, then test it out on a piece of paper. And the sensibility that you want to be applying it with is like, you want to think about it almost like you're applying like powder. You know what I mean? Powdering your scene, okay? See those clouds right there, how nice and billowy they look? Now let's bring some of this little mist down into the landscape, about like so, okay? So like at the base of some of these trees, I'm applying a little bit. If you apply too much, just wipe it off a little bit and it'll come off. It doesn't set up so fast that you can't adjust it. Don't use the stays on one, which is really, the stays on white. That would dry too fast, okay? Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of soft light at the end of the road, like this. See that right there? It kind of gives it that kind of foggy kind of effect over your terrain, and it just makes for a nice textural change within the piece. Maybe entering our scene, there's a little bit of mist right at the base of the fence posts, about like so. Let's see, it kind of gives the illusion or the feeling of this kid taking off, bright and early. He wanted to go, catch his fish like early in the morning. Couldn't wait for the weekend, for Saturday to come around. And he got up bright and early to go to his favorite fishing hole. But I think that should do it there. All right. So instead of 2 hours, we're looking at 40 minutes. Okay. But let's take a look at the two versions right here. All right. Not too bad, right? in terms of time, expenditure. Like I said, this is a half-page scene practically. So that's not too bad. If you might be able to knock one of these off, just like this scene right here, that would be like a single page scene like that. Maybe 25 minutes or something like that, less than a half an hour, standard card size. But this gets in a lot of different techniques. I think we saved ourselves some, decent amount of time with the colored pencils down here, but, I think it looks pretty good in terms of, our light and shadow that we were able to develop. We have a lot going on with the paint pens in terms of texturing in there. So not too bad. I don't know if this is a quick scene. This is a lot of color and media applied and a half page again. But I think it is relatively quick in terms of the applications of media to achieve a certain look or feel to a scene. So anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. If you like this video, hope you like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.